Hi, everyone. Welcome as you're coming in from the waiting room. Thank you for joining us tonight. I know there's a lot of you in there, so I'm going to give everyone a few moments to pop in. For those of you joining us, you are here for another webinar event from Nova Star Prep. We really appreciate your attendance tonight, and we're excited to see so many people join us to talk about College Admissions 101, a very pertinent topic, I imagine, to all the parents and students in this group, and one for myself as well as a parent of a junior. So again, going to let everybody keep coming in and make sure that everyone here is aware of who Nova Star is. So as you get settled, I'd love to explain a little bit more about the company we are and the services we offer for those of you that may not be familiar with us. I imagine there's some friendly faces out there as well who we have worked with in the past. But for your reference, Nova Star Prep is a comprehensive tutoring service organization where we offer very personalized tutoring through pretty much every subject. Try to stump us with one, with 500 plus tutors spanning grades K through 12 and college level courses. We do test prep, we do college admissions coaching. I started here as a college coach myself, and we certainly have the test prep expertise that individuals are looking for every time the SAT and the ACT decide to change themselves. We do a ton of college readiness, and that's going to be the main topic tonight, talking about the basics of college application, things parents need to know, how to manage the stress of all of it. And, as much as we can fit into an hour about a really lengthy, sometimes overwhelming process that can be made more manageable with support like educational programming like this and working with a college coach. And certainly breaking it down into manageable pieces, which I hope to do for you today. And I hope it makes it a bit more manageable. We also are very proud of the dedicated support that we offer students. Every student that works with us has their own dedicated success advisor who monitors their progress, works closely with parents, helps provide biweekly progress reports from the tutors. So you're never behind, you're never wondering what your student is doing. And this is across subjects, whether you're doing a college essay with us or you have a second grader who wants help with reading. This goes across the board in all of those areas. And so that's what we do. You're going to get some links from my colleague Diana, who's in the chat today, and we'll be looking at some of our questions, sharing some links to our services and learning more about us and the opportunity to book a consultation. In terms of learning more about us, I'll very briefly give you guys an introduction to who I am. I'm Bernadette Smith. I'm the Education Programs Director here at Nova Star Prep, and I have a master's degree in school counseling and a master's degree in English. I am a licensed counselor in the state of Massachusetts for grades 5 through 12, and I've been a college coach. I started here as a college coach a few years back and have been a private college coach throughout my career. One day I'll have to change this slide to say more than 15 years as I creep closer to 20 years as a writing tutor, college instructor, and academic coach. So I'm bringing to you a couple years of knowledge here between working in a public high school that was extremely high achieving and also working with students in an out-of-district placement for students with accommodations. So I'm going to be talking to you all about different stages of the journey, and we'll dive right in. So here we have College Admissions 101, a parent's guide, and this is where we're going to be sharing with you a few different things. There is a mention here that a lot of you will be able to receive 2 free hours of tutoring with the purchase of a package and 50% off registration. We'll also talk about that in the chat. But the agenda for tonight is covering college application basics, building the college list, recommendations and testing, essays that stand out, activities that count. We've seen a lot of change with that in the last several years, so I'm looking forward to sharing more with you about that. And then also applying with confidence. And certainly time for Q&A. You can pop questions into the Q&A throughout, and Diana will be able to answer some of those. Other ones that you will get, she'll bring them up to me or we'll cover them at the end. So certainly, pop them in as you think of them, or feel free to save some towards the end. Tonight's webinar is being recorded, so everyone will receive a YouTube link following tonight's event. And also you will receive some materials from me, some follow-up information, including a nice list to keep track of all the college tasks that come for high school students. So the thing I like to emphasize as a college counselor is that truly this process is about the student. Watching for years the stress that this puts on students, the way that they constantly compare themselves to each other and how that weighs on them. As a counselor, I can't ignore that. And it's really important to keep in mind that 1 in 8 prospective college applicants really think about just stopping the process, abandoning it because of application-related stress. And sometimes that's because of doing stuff last minute. Sometimes that's because of the comparison factor. Other times it's just so overwhelming that it becomes difficult to manage. That's why we want to break it into manageable parts. And that's what we're going to do tonight. So moving forward from there, we're going to go into college application basics. So many of you have heard about the various types of admissions plans that are available to students, namely being early action, early decision, regular decision, and rolling decision. There are various offshoots of this with early action 2, ED1, ED2. There's also, preferred deadlines, like Virginia Tech has a preferred deadline, for example, that's different than their early action deadline. So there's a lot out there. But to give you the general gist of what we see for the most part across admissions, we'll start with early action. That typically comes with a November 1st or a November 15th deadline. I do put an asterisk there because, of course, there are some schools who have moved their early action to December 1st and December 15th, but you will find the vast majority are on November 1st and November 15th. These are non-binding typically. That being said, there are a couple of schools who ask you to not apply early action elsewhere. So there's some different rules there. The benefits of applying early action certainly is that it would be that you receive your notification early. If this is a school that you are particularly in love with, it's nice to know, and nice to know if you're submitting some regular decision ones, you already found out about one early on in the school year. Then there's early decision. This is where we get into the binding type of admission plan. So again, this is usually due on November 1st and November 15th. And when they say binding, that means if you are accepted to a school to which you apply early decision, you must attend that school. And so that means if you've heard from other schools, you have to say no. If you have other applications out there, you have to rescind them and take them back. And the tough part about this can be, if it's your dream school, no tough part about it, right? That's fantastic. But one tough aspect of it can be that if you do not get those other schools with their financial aid packages, you may not know what you could have received in terms of scholarships and merit-based aid, and as well as financial need. So sometimes that's a downside to it. And of course, if a student changes their mind, that can be very difficult as you are required to attend. Of course, in my career, I've seen instances in which a student has chosen not to. It comes with its own problems, but please do consider it binding. At that point, students find out in December, and that's a really great way to feel at the midpoint of senior year. Regular decision, you see a lot of deadlines listed here. This is where we see January 1st, January 15th. Some schools have January 2nd so that it's not due on New Year's Day. Then there's February 1st, February 15th. I've seen some March 1st and some March 15th. So really, this is non-binding. This is the most traditional approach to applying to college. So you'll see this one very frequently. Every school has regular decision. Typically speaking, though, the downside to this is finding out much later in senior year, between March 1st and April 1st, giving you 2 and sometimes 1 month to decide before the May 1st deadline. For a lot of students, they'll have a combination of these. So doing some early action, maybe one early decision, and then a bunch of regular decision. Some students will hold their regular decision applications, banking on perhaps an early action or ED one. And a lot of students will just apply straight up early action, straight up early regular decision rather. That being said, there's some schools where you should do that, and some schools where, they have various statistics out there about what makes the most sense. Virginia Tech, it is very difficult to apply their regular decision. We do encourage most students to do their preferred deadline, for example. But, then there's also some considerations about who should apply for that, which we'll cover next. Lastly, there's rolling decision, which is ongoing. This means a student could apply in September, for example, find out 4 weeks later that they're accepted, or they could apply in April of the spring of their senior year and find out that they're accepted. So of course that is non-binding, and it's ongoing within weeks. So decisions can come anywhere between 4 and 6 weeks after submitting an application. So then this becomes deciding which one is right for you. I've had a lot of students over the course of my career want to apply early action because all of their friends are applying early action. I've had other students who absolutely should have applied early action that didn't think it was right for them. And it's really important to think about readiness, your testing timeline, depending on when you're taking the SAT or the ACT, and any of your financial aid needs. You don't have to decide today. I mean, I suppose if you are a senior and you've got a month left until the early action deadline, you may need to be making that decision. But if you're on the younger side or your students are on the younger side, certainly you want to explore those options. This is where a college coach can help you build a balanced strategy, because I have, consistently told students when I think it's a good idea, a bad idea, or truly up in the air if early action is the right move for them. In this topic of who should apply early, this should have an asterisk next to it as well, because every student has an individual story. Every student comes from a different background, and every student is applying to a wide variety of schools. But across my career and what we see from all of the research that is done on this, the students who should apply early are the students who have done their research. You don't want to apply early action to a school that you don't care about, that you haven't gone beyond their initial web page, that you don't really see yourself attending. We don't want to apply to apply. We want to apply because we can see ourselves there. And it's really important that the student knows that this school might be one of their top choices. That's really important to consider. It's either their top or one of their top 3. And then this is really important. Throughout the years, and I'm sure you all have heard this as well, you'll be told you have a better chance to apply early than you do regular decision. There are certain cases where that's true. There are certain cases where that's not the case. And there are circumstances that are individual to every child that makes that not necessarily a widely applicable blanket of explanation for how to do so. So I really recommend that it's a student who meets or exceeds the admission profile for the college in terms of the SAT scores, the GPA, what they might be looking for in terms of a fit for their community. And I think in that sense, this can be difficult for students who might fall below there. One thing you have to really consider and understand about the early action process is you are putting yourself in a pool of even stronger applicants, because those students are doing that right here. And so that is a part of the process. By no means am I telling a student that they can't apply early action if they're slightly below, but if you're significantly below the minimum admission requirements, it may be less than ideal to jump into that particular pool. And certainly we want to be a student who's shown consistency and growth on their academic record. There's a couple of different situations that can come out of applying early. Students can be straight out rejected. Students can be transferred to the regular decision pool. They can be waitlisted and then put in that regular decision pool and ultimately accepted or rejected after that. So there's no guarantee that you go into the regular decision pool following that. In a lot of cases, that does happen, though. And when we think about what colleges value, I think it's really important to take into consideration that these things change and every college is different. That being said, it's very true that the rigor of classes that a student chooses to take, so besides what they're placed in, are they seeking out more difficult opportunities? Are they looking for dual enrollment? Are they taking AP or IB courses? Did a student take a bunch of easy classes senior year just to coast, or did they continue to challenge themselves as a lifelong learner? Of course, grades and academics, we can see here on our beach ball graphic, we know that that's a huge component. And at a different school, we could even see the wedge change a little bit here, or change on the testing side of things, where we're seeing 15% here. I've seen for other schools where that means close to half. I've seen other schools where they truly are very optional and it's a smaller component. And when we see other and extracurriculars here, that is very important. We're looking for depths of experience. We're looking for commitment. We're looking for leadership. So when you look at this and, certain other factors, the essay, thinking about interviews, if that's the case at a particular institution, It can vary by institution. This is from NACAC, which is the National Association of College Admissions Counselors, from 2024. And I imagine when they post their 2026 one, we're going to see a slight change in it as well. But it's helpful to kind of compartmentalize and know that there's various components to this. And it's not necessarily that one is going to always outweigh the other. So, again, as a counselor, I can't help but move towards how do we move away from panic and more progress? And so the stress-free planning approach that I recommend and is really starting early. And for everyone, that could mean something different. I've given presentations where we're talking about starting the college process in 7th grade. There are other times where it's second semester, sophomore year, and that's when the family might be considering making some moves towards that process. It can also just be early in junior year if you're just starting to think about it. But wherever you are, you want to get started. You want to set a clear timeline that can break those tasks into doable steps. That can even be making sure you talk to your guidance counselor about the rigor of your classes next year, making sure that you are talking to a teacher about being your recommender. That can be about, when you want to go on college tours. And truly, I can't emphasize this enough. There is no perfect path. Every student's journey is entirely different. As a parent myself, I can imagine that both of my daughters will have very different journeys and be very successful individuals. Maybe I'm a little biased there, but that is the case. And you want to go with what fits and what makes a student happy, because they have to sleep there, eat there, make friends there, work there, learn there, and certainly go on to build their futures. I would suggest working with a coach, because I can say as a guidance counselor myself, I was not the most helpful person to my daughter when she was applying to college. Sometimes they need a third-party person, and sometimes you need to not have the tension about the conversation. Now we will move on to building the college list. And I know some questions have popped up, and I know that there's might be something in the chat as well. But if there are any questions about early action, early decision, certainly, do let us know and we'll answer as we can. And I do think someone might be raising their hand. So let me see. There's a few hand raised. So if you all can type the questions into the Q&A, and we can get to some questions vocally when we get closer towards the end. Thank you. All right, so for building the college list, we wanted to think about fit, not rankings, to an extent. I know, everyone is, interested in the Ivies and the top 25s, and that comes up quite a bit. Or maybe perhaps where their parents went to school. Certainly we see that. I have told my students to apply to where I went to college. I've told them to apply to schools that I have a favor for. So, that does happen, but we want to make sure that there are many paths to success, and you want to keep an open mind. There are over 4,000 colleges in the United States. Odds are you don't know everything about every one of them. I don't, and I'm in the field. And then we want to think about quality over quantity. This would be where sometimes we have students, they decide to apply to 20 schools, 25 schools, where that just simply doesn't make sense, and it becomes incredibly stressful and expensive. I had a student in my past who had 26 colleges on their college list. There was no way this young man liked all of those schools. There's no way he visited all of those schools. And truly, at the end of the day, it was really only 2 of them that he really liked. But he did spend a lot of money, a lot of time writing multiple essays for colleges he wasn't truly interested in. For building the college list, the actual act of doing so, you want to focus on what's important to the student. Academic programs that are of interest to them. So we know there's colleges out there that are liberal arts research institutions that have 70+ majors, 80+ majors. So odds are your student's going to find what they want there, or if they need to transfer majors, they're going to find that. But if it's something very specialized, or if there's something that the program does that's important to you, is there a component where it's a 6 and 5 program where you get your bachelor's degree and your master's degree? Do they have a particular study abroad program? Is there something about the program in terms of internships that stand out to you? That is really important to consider. Campus size, location, the overall vibe of how they feel when they're there. I'm fortunate enough to be someone who, the second I walked on campus, I knew that's where I wanted to be. Not every student feels that immediately. They got to, kind of suss it out and feel what might be best for them. campus size can be, something as small as where they went to high school or even smaller, and it can be up to, 60, 70,000 students on a campus on a given day. So when we think about that, some students may feel like they want to go really big, but they might be thinking more medium, like 12,000 students. And certainly for families, you want to think about cost and scholarships and financial aid opportunities and think about where you have a really good shot at making that college bill come down a little bit. And then, as I mentioned before, you want to focus on living, learning, working, and socializing there. This is not just where you're going to school, it's where you're starting to build your independent life. And so that's why I truly recommend creating a list that has that balance, as well as the balance of reach, target, and likely schools to keep those options open and to reduce that pressure that students put on themselves to only apply to this top tier of certain schools because so-and-so in math class is doing the same thing. Typically speaking, as I've worked with students over the years, I've given them a top 10 college search criteria worksheet. Now it would be on a Chromebook or something like that, but, going through what they really find to be important to them. So we certainly, look here to the basics, 2-year, 4-year, private, public, vocational school, gap year, whatever it might be. And for a lot of our students, they know right off the bat. They've already decided it's 4-year college and that's the direction they're going in. But I would have students go through this. Do you want to be at home? Do you want to commute? Do you want to be on campus? Is this a school that guarantees housing all 4 years? Or do you know that sophomore year you're on your own to go find something else, or you're in a lottery to live on campus? So those are things to consider. And then also to think about, do you want to be in your home state? Do you want to be in the mid-Atlantic? Do you want to be in New England? Do you want to be abroad? For me, my oldest daughter is 15 minutes away at college, and my youngest wants to go to California. So, there's various things there where we want to take that into consideration, and it might surprise them when they come time to make the decision. I won't lead you through all 10 of these, but really thinking about the town itself. Do you want to be in a more rural area? Would you rather be in a suburban area? Do you truly want to be in a city like New York City, a city like Boston? Is that where you see yourself? Or do you see yourself more suburban, where you can hop on the train, get to the city and access those things, but you'd like to be in a smaller area that's not necessarily the bustling area of Manhattan? So these are things to think about. Here you can see it's really important to think about the size of the school, as I mentioned before. And we're small. I gave some local considerations here that Roanoke would be considered a smaller college. William and Mary would be more so on the medium side, and Virginia Tech would certainly be on the large side with 32,000 students. All right. So what does every college list need? My recommendation for years now to every student I've worked with, and I know this is the same for a lot of my colleagues, is a manageable range of schools. For me, that's 7 to 12. That means 1 to 3 low probability / reach schools, 4 to 6 target schools, and 2 to 3 very likely, what we've often called safety schools. There should be a mix of private and public, because you never know how much financial aid is going to get thrown at you, and you want to see what the different environments are like, and see what might come of that merit-based scholarship and the aid that could come your way. So when we think about selectivity, we want to understand what that really means. So there is something called open admission, which is all or most admitted. So this would typically be your community colleges, that they typically have a 100% acceptance rate, barring an issue with taking some of the placement tests. And if you're testing into remedial, you might not enroll in a traditional way immediately. And, that's a different scenario in and of itself. Then we have less selective. This is where more than 75% of students are admitted. Somewhat selective would be there in the middle with 50 to 75% of students admitted. Very selective falls in that 25 to 50% admitted. And most selective, this is where you're going to see less than 25% for their admissions rate. For example, over the last several years, we've seen Stanford sit at a 3.9% acceptance rate. And that's, there's other ones, I believe UVA is at a 17% acceptance rate. So we know that these things, they ebb and flow with the years. We've seen changes because of test optional and because of test required coming back in. But this is a basic way to understand that, so you can start framing your college list accordingly. So to understand those categories, and I think some of them are very self-explanatory, but when we're thinking about low probability and reach, this is where the student's academic profile is at the lower end of the admitted spectrum or far below it. It's less likely the student would be admitted, and often that college acceptance rate is low. So we might see that with that less than 25% admitted. For target and match schools, this is where the applicant feels fairly certain they have a really good shot at admission. We can't guarantee it, but their GPA and test scores are similar to the average accepted student. And you may be thinking, how can I determine what that is besides seeing maybe an average when I Google it? Schools have what they refer to as admissions profiles of last year's accepted class. And so you can go see the median of the SAT score accepted. You can see for the freshman class what the average entering GPA was, and that can be really helpful for framing your college list. And then, we know here the students' credentials make them competitive for admission and a decent chance at acceptance. That's why we have that bulk in the middle there for the college list. Then we move on to high probability / safety schools. And this is where you're pretty darn sure that you're going to be admitted based on the academic profile that you have. GPA and test scores are notably higher than the average admitted student. And every student should have one or two of these on their application where they actually feel like they could attend there. Because any scenario could happen and you want to have a place where you could be happy. And every student should have one just for the sake of having a backup, but also one that they could really see themselves at. So here I have a sample college list just of what I always put on the college list that I create with my students and that I've done, with friends and family for their students as well. So obviously the name of the school, the deadline, the selectivity that we're looking at, SAT ranges, and you'll see on the next slide, the next two categories about programs and campus life. Here we have UVA, a very popular school I know for a lot of us here, and we also have Virginia Tech, which I would say go Hokies. We do like Virginia Tech in this house. Nothing against UVA, but they are our enemy. So here we do want to note their various deadlines. Here's where you can see that priority December 8th one for Virginia Tech and the acceptance rates that I mentioned before. So we're seeing like the average accepted one for Virginia Tech is a 4.07 that's weighted. And we're seeing 3.75 or above for UVA, but it's certainly much higher than that. We're seeing more of a 4.4. So you can see here, looking at the different test optional policies, the median of what we're seeing accepted for test scores. And I put a lot of asterisks next to test optional, and we'll cover that as we continue about what that really means. And right now, Virginia Tech is saying they're test optional through the fall of 2028. Then I also want to make sure on the college list we're considering, and I can certainly send an outline of this to individuals who are interested, looking at the programs and majors. So the top one still being UVA here, the bottom one here being Virginia Tech, and just some notes about them. And this would be also where a student could note for them, if it's a safety, target, or reach school, they could note something about a study abroad program they're interested in. They could note something about why they might prefer one location over the other. But just getting it into an organized list so you can literally see, okay, I've got 3 safety schools, I've got 5 target schools, here are my reach schools. And then you can balance it out that way and pull schools off, add schools back in, and have it all in one cohesive place to track all the research that you're doing, all the work you're doing towards it, and then eventually add a category here for just how many essays you have to write individually for them. So we'll talk about essays in the next part of the presentation, but certainly you're going to write some extra ones about why you want to attend that college. Virginia Tech has 4 separate essays that you have to write. Other schools have ones based on how do you define success. So all things you want to list here so no essays sneak up on you later on. In terms of assessing that college list, as I mentioned, you just want to balance it. You want to assess it based on the admissions profiles I mentioned, and just really making sure you're finding schools that are a good fit. And so that you could see yourself wanting to be on that type of campus. You like the overall campus vibe. There's some schools that are very community service driven. A student might feel really inclined to go there. There are other schools where the school spirit is particularly high and they want to be in an environment like that. Balancing out those things on the list, making sure it fits with who your student is and the reality of their admissions profile and where they want to see themselves in a couple of years. Now we'll move on to letters of rec and testing. This section's brief on the letter of rec side, because I know a lot of our students receive very clear instructions about this in school, but it's important to think about. In terms of when you should ask, if there are any teachers in the audience, I'm sure you would like to know before the end of junior year how many essays you're writing. A lot of teachers will have deadlines posted saying, I need to know before finals if you want me to write one for you over the summer. There are some teachers who are extremely popular with students and end up being asked to write 50 letters of recommendation in a given admission section. So we want to follow those leads, ask them if they haven't mentioned something about a deadline, please do ask them. They may have their own requirements, such as a recommendation form, because they may know you well, but they may not know everything that you do. And there's a lot of times at the last school I worked at, for example, what they did was they asked, what was your most memorable part of this class? And that helped stick out to the teacher in their memory of an idea that they could highlight in the letter. It makes it more personable. It makes it less of a cookie cutter letter that comes out. So thinking about those things and having an earnest conversation with a teacher about why you'd like them to be your recommender and why they would be a good representative of who you are as a student. A lot of times in my career, I've seen students email their teachers to ask to be the recommender, and some teachers are fine with that. Other ones really want you to ask in person. So please make sure that you're thinking about that as well. For counselors, we have to write it. We know we're going to write it, but there's usually forms we have you fill out as well. And then for, who it might be, a lot of times it's a junior year teacher. A lot of times you want to pick from 2 different subjects. So if you already have an English teacher, you might want to pick somebody maybe from math, science, maybe an elective class that you took that, like, a particularly interesting anatomy and physiology class. If it's a senior teacher, you want to make sure that it's somebody you had a relationship with before. Maybe they were your coach. Maybe you had them for an elective a couple years earlier. Maybe they're the leader or the teacher that's part of an organization that you're in, and they're, the facilitator of that. And you want to ask for at least 2 letters of recommendation. There are some schools that only accept 1 plus the college counselor, and rather as the school counselor, or they accept 2 plus the school counselor. There's a couple out there for 3. Those are becoming more rare. And then there's other opportunities where you may be able to submit another letter of recommendation for an honors college, scholarship applications, things like that. And so now we'll move on from letters of rec, because like I said, that's a little brief part there, but talking about standardized testing. So, certainly we're going to talk about the SAT, the ACT, and test optional. We now know for over a year now, the SAT is digital and adaptive, meaning that its score adapts after module 1 based on the student's performance. And so therefore they either get an easy module or a hard module. The ACT in suit followed with them and decided to go digital as well, but they're still offering the paper test. It is not adaptive, and the science section is now optional. So if a student takes the science section, it will create a STEM score for them, but it will no longer count towards the composite. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. If science was stopping your student from taking the ACT, now they can certainly go ahead and take it. And then for the SAT side of things, there was never a science. The writing has been gone for a long time, and the writing is still optional with the ACT. And then test optional, this is a topic that has been, extremely ever changing over the last several years, especially since the pandemic, but it was nothing new before the pandemic. I had a list in my office of 1,400 schools that were test optional that I shared with students. So it's not entirely that brand new, but there's a lot of nuance to it. And it's not as optional as one would think in a lot of cases. And we're going to continue to see changes as, over the last couple of years, UT Austin came back to requiring, Tufts University came back to requiring. We're seeing the Ivies all go in that direction as well. And we're seeing it for other schools. That's why Virginia Tech put out 2028 as the marker right now, because they may change it and they want to give families a heads up if it goes back to required. And so now we can talk about those myths versus reality. And this is really, we have a full-blown webinar about this that I'd love for you all to attend, where we go through this in extreme detail with various school examples. But to give everyone here tonight an understanding of those policies, There are several. So there's general test optional, which is the one you've probably heard about the most. This is where scores are not required, but can be submitted. So that's one where likely your greatest amount of schools offer that policy. Then there's conditional test optional, where this is where it's not required for the school, but required for specific programs. We've seen this a lot for nursing, for example. A school might be completely test optional, but for intended nursing majors, they may have to submit. For some engineering programs or other STEM ones, for honors programs, that may happen as well. So you may see a school listed as test optional, dig a little deeper into their admissions page or give the office a call and find out, well, just so you know, if you're applying to, human and health services, you need to submit this. If you're applying to mechanical engineering, you need to submit this. So things to keep in mind. Then there's test blind. That's when they don't want your score, don't send it, they won't look at it, and they're not even an option on the College Board to list it. So those still exist, those are still out there. And then there's test flexible. That's where you can send a different score. So maybe you're not sending an SAT or an ACT, but they welcome an AP or an IB score. Oftentimes they want more than one though in that case, because you might send in an AP Lit score or an AP Lang score, but they want to see something else in addition to that, perhaps from one of the sciences, or vice versa there. Maybe they want to see A Push combined with AP Physics, something like that. And then lastly, there's placement required, where maybe it's not part of admissions, but they're going to allow you or require you to submit SAT scores after being admitted to either bypass a placement test to determine those first year courses. And there's, an example of a school out there where they also just require the math score for engineering majors for placement. So that's something to keep in mind, and that you want to have those scores handy. And that goes to this question. So if we're living in a test optional world, why have and submit scores? Well, first, like we said, it's changing all the time. And then there is something referred to as the submitter advantage. This is something that we've been tracking pretty closely, and that some schools have been incredibly transparent about, and that's why you'll see some policy changes. So for example, at highly selective schools, score submitters are just admitted at a higher rate because a lot of those students are submitting scores, they're achieving scores that they feel like they should be sending there, and they're trying to differentiate themselves from all the other students with 4.4 GPAs. That's another reason why we want this. We're experiencing a lot of GPA inflation across the United States. More students than ever have A's in classes, and that's not to say that they haven't achieved that, but some things have changed in terms of the way we've graded in general since the pandemic, and just in various ways where grading standards have changed to some extent. For UVA, for example, the overall admit rate was 20% in the past year, and this would be for 2024, but 72% of the 9,875 students who had gained admission did submit test scores, and they submitted them in that 1350 to 1450 range. So that's important to keep in mind. So they're test optional, but 72% of their admitted students submitted scores. Georgia Tech, for example, before they went back to test required, 79% of their admitted students submitted scores, and then they changed their mind and went back to test required. For the other reason here, beyond that submitter advantage, because you may have a really great test score, there's eligibility for honors programs. For example, West Virginia has a honors program that requires a 1230 on the SAT. So a student might want those opportunities. There's a lot of different benefits and perks to being an honors student, some really great educational opportunities, early registration for really sought after classes, more advisors. And so certainly, you want to look at that if that's important to your child. And a lot of times you can get a conferred dual degree of being an honors student in addition to your bachelor's degree with your major. Then it can also be access to larger merit scholarships. Hofstra reserves their top scholarships for score submitters. That's their biggest ones, and they reserve the biggest amount for them. Other schools have rules where they're truly test optional with it, and they only go by GPA for merit. Other schools are reserving some of it for those with scores. So again, another reason to think about why you might want one. And for other students, it's a chance to show and have the test scores speak for themselves. You know, sometimes a student's transcript might not reflect their strengths. Maybe they had a really tough sophomore year in geometry and it was really hard for them, but then math really started to pick up for them, and then they get an excellent SAT math score. And that's a way to show a difference that was made after a little hiccup in high school. You know, it also can highlight potential in lieu of limited access to really challenging classes. Not every school offers every AP class on the planet. Some schools have fewer resources. So this is a chance to show on a standardized level what you're capable of. And then, like I said, it can bypass some placement tests, so that's always a nice thing. All right. And just for people's awareness in terms of testing, we do have an SAT mock on October 11th. So if your student wants to try out the SAT or perhaps the ACT on October 4th, or try both and see which one is the better fit for them, that's an opportunity, and it builds test taking endurance. So certainly we'll send you a link about that. We also have an SAT boot camp this weekend that if you want to register last minute, feel free. It's 2 days of SAT instruction, but we do host one every month. And we have an SAT Edge class for students with a starting score of 1200 or higher, starting on October 5th. And there's various dates coming up for the official test. As you can imagine, the SAT has an October, November, December test. And then we also have the ACT coming up in December as well. So they match up on certain test dates and then are opposite on other ones. Now, here's a topic I know parents are certainly interested in, and I know there's a lot of students out there putting off writing the essay while their homework piles up as seniors. We're going to dive into this. We also have another webinar where we talk about the essays for the entire hour, so I encourage you the next time you see our post about that, certainly join us. But I did want to dive into it a little bit tonight, just so people are aware of what's expected and what else you might encounter. So for the Common App essay prompts, they haven't changed in a while, but every year you can see if they're changing. These 7 have been the same for a little bit now, and they might change wording on a little bit of it, but not drastic. What's going to happen is your student is going to pick one of these. They're not going to write all 7. They're not going to submit different ones to different schools. I mean, I've had students try to do that. It becomes very complicated. That's why you're never mentioning a college's name in a college essay, unless it's, why do I want to attend UMass Amherst? Other than that, you're not going to mention the name of the school. But for here, students can pick any one of these. You know, an example would be some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful they believe their application would be incomplete without it. That could be anything. So a background, a talent, an interest, an identity. So imagine the absolute, you know, plethora of topics a student could cover here. And then number 7 is topic of your choice. So whatever your student wants to write about, it's going to find its way in here. We just want to make sure that what they write about is authentic and is going to show a side of them that the admissions committee can't glean just from the numbers on an application and the boxes that you check. And so, for example, which prompt is chosen most often? Number 7, topic of your choice across the board. This can be sometimes a student already has an essay they want to use for this and they tweak it. Another time where they don't feel like it quite fits into one of those categories, because you do have to select which prompt you're responding to. But topic of your choice tells us students are also being creative about this. They're thinking about different types of stories. I've read a lot of interesting ones in my career, from shower thoughts, what it's like to be left-handed. There's a famous one out there about riding the L in Chicago and what that student took in. I've had students write about being tall. You know, there's some really unique things, and it's not always my, you know, they see a lot of repetitive essays, and these are human beings that are reading these all day. And you want to make sure that the essay at the end of it answers this question: so what? That's what they want to answer at the end. What does this tell us about Jacqueline? What does this tell us about Katie? We want to know the answer to that. And so when you keep that in mind and you ask yourself that every time you read the essay or every time you think about a prompt, it will really help you say, what am I telling them? Am I showing them that I'm resilient? Am I showing them that I'm a leader? Am I trying to be something I'm not? That's what's really important there. In terms of choosing the right essay, you know, it takes time. I really suggest reading and rereading the prompts and taking notes on them, having your students see which ones they relate to, highlight the first 3 that jump out to you, even if it is topic of your choice. And then seek input. Parents, you have all the stories about your students, right? Like, you know what your children have done. And sometimes it's very hard for us to look at ourselves and be like, this is the thing I want to tell admissions. But your parents know, your best friends know, your relatives, your teachers. It might be an experience you would never think about writing about. And it could be the best possible essay for you. It doesn't have to be what you think the college wants to hear. They want to hear your voice. They're reading a lot of essays. They're reading essays at 4:25 when they leave the office at 4:30. You want to make sure that you're showing them something unique. You want to capture your thoughts, write down some sentences in your own words to expand your idea. When you thought about these topics, think about where you want to take it. And then it becomes time to brainstorm, outline, and write. As a college coach, that's what I've done with students for years. As a guidance counselor, that's what I've done with students for years. And, as a writing tutor, it does help to have somebody really flesh it all out and really make sure that you're not going in a direction that's going to be confusing. You're not going in a direction that might be more detrimental, that maybe you understand and they don't, and that you're really telling a story that's unique and sounds like you. We live in a time where students are going to write essays with ChatGPT. We know that. And we know that admissions is adapting to that. They know when it doesn't sound like you. They know when it sounds like the same repetitive words that ChatGPT likes to pump out. That doesn't mean you can't ask ChatGPT, hey, can you help me think about a few ideas based on my activities resume? You can upload that, say, tell me what you think here, or tell them a story and be like, do you think this is good for a college essay? That's okay. You just cannot have it write it for you. It needs to be authentic, and you can feel authentic, and you can feel when it's not. And so, the myth I've always heard is that my essay needs to be the most scholastic and perfect writing example I've ever had. That is not the case. It's about being authentic. It's about showing your voice and your perspective. So yes, of course, we want you to dot your I's, cross your T's, use your commas correctly, capitalize when you're supposed to, but it's not supposed to be necessarily a 5-paragraph essay following a rubric. I've read ones that are 2 paragraphs. I've read ones that are a run-on sentence. There's some unique things out there. Faulkner wrote 20 pages where there was no punctuation, and he's a genius. Or was a genius. So there's definitely different things that you can put into this to make it unique. All right, so that was about the Common App essays. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the Why Us essays. And Diana, are there any questions that need to pop up now, or should we save them to the end?
Yes, there are 2 questions, one related to SAT.
Sure.
And SAT versus ACT, and the other one, if you could speak about scores, please.
Sure, absolutely. So when we're talking about taking the SAT and the ACT, I truly, truly believe you should decide with a practice test first, and then make sure that you're thinking about not focusing on both for prep. They're very different tests, very different formats in the terms, especially like the reading section. You're going to see that it's very different on ACT from SAT in terms of the formatting of it. SAT has very small excerpts, whereas on the ACT, they're very lengthy. So that's a consideration. But there is a conversion chart between the two, so we can see which test is better for you. Rather than waste it on an official opportunity, I would suggest taking a mock SAT and then a mock ACT, comparing the results with somebody like myself or one of my colleagues, and seeing which test is better before committing to taking both. Or committing to one path. I don't recommend prepping for both, certainly not. And no college is going to ask for both from you. And then I see here, test optional policies in past year, does this inflate the overall average test scores that are reported? Right, so absolutely, and that's what we see, right? We know certain kids are going to submit those test scores because they are high achievers and they're achieving those test scores. So there would be some inflation there, but we've also seen historically that UVA one, for example, has matched up pretty closely with what they accepted a few years before that. But it's been increasing over years anyway because of selectivity. So it's not necessarily a yes or no answer, but I can tell you there is some inflation there and they're running with it, right? So that's that's part of it as well. And then does my essay have to relate back to academics, or do I just talk about myself and my personality? It certainly does not have to relate back to academics. I have read numerous where they know their Common App is already showing their academics, and they want to talk about how important dance is to them, and that they've been dancing since they were 5, and how it makes them feel, or the connection it gives them to their grandmother, or whatever it might be. That's really important to keep in mind. And so I think there are opportunities where students do stick to the academics, but it's something really unique. Like I've had a student in the past where they were so fascinated by particular battles, and man, it's been a couple years, but it was in a very specific war, and not World War II, not World War I, where they focused on that so much in their free time that it just was almost an obsession in a really intelligent way, and they wrote about that. So it certainly doesn't have to be there. And then let me grab this one before going on to the why us essays. How far in math should our child be before taking the SAT and the ACT? Do they need to complete Algebra 2? You do not need to complete Algebra 2. There is some Algebra 2 on the test, but it doesn't get through the entire class. I suggest starting with it a little bit earlier. You don't have to, like, so my daughter's a junior, for example, and we're going to take different paths for that. I recommend for other juniors do the December and the March test, for example. It really depends on when you're taking it, but you want to make sure you at least get to get through Algebra 1, get through geometry, because there's geometry on both tests, and you want to be able to work on statistics, not having taken a class from that, but you will see statistics related questions. But you can be halfway through Algebra 2, you can be a third of the way through. Keep in mind, there's no pre-calc or calculus. So the further you move away from SAT math, the more your students are going to forget. All right. So what tests did I refer to on the slides? Oh, that would be the 15% was testing for so SAT, ACT. All right, and those AP exams and things like that they allow for the test conditional ones. All right, so now a lot of times you're going to encounter, why do you want to attend blank university? And usually it's short. They give you 150 words, sometimes 50 words, sometimes 250. It may say optional. I never think it is. So you may encounter a question that says, please tell us why you want to attend UMass Amherst. Or why do you believe George Mason University is the right institution for you? These questions are typically found on the Common App under custom questions, or in writing, but it's typically under custom questions in the school-specific sections of the Common App. This is where it's just for that school. It has nothing to do with anyone else. The Common App essay is separate over here. This is just for UMass Amherst, for example. Sometimes they're optional, but some schools require them, or require an extra essay if you're applying test optional. So keep your eyes open for that as well. Typical length, anywhere from 100 to 400 words, but there's definitely a lot of do's and don'ts about these essays. You do want to do some thorough research. If you're going to write this essay, you don't want to sound like the only thing you know about the school is who their mascot is, or something you saw on their front page that they were ranked 144th in the newest poll from so-and-so in liberal arts universities. We want to make sure that you're talking to your local admissions reps, look at a course catalog, look at a syllabus. I remember seeing a class offered at my alma mater that was about religious and artistic responses to the plague. It was a really interesting class. Oh, it was psychological reactions to it as well. Fascinating stuff. These are things you want to mention, showing that you're truly interested and why you're interested in that. Because the essay is really about you. It's not about the school. Mention 2 or 3 reasons, if you have room, about why you're applying. Is there a specific major? Is there a chance to do part of your master's degree in Ireland? Is there a chance to take an internship that takes you to DC over the summer and you're going to school someplace else? You want to mention specific things here. You want to pull something out that's unique. You want to talk about the campus climate. Is there something that draws you there? I mentioned community service before. Maybe you're interested in being more environmentally friendly. There are campuses that have that at their core. And then you don't want to just say the campus is pretty. They have landscapers, they know. You don't want to say the weather's nice. They have meteorologists, they know. But you don't want to write that you have a friend attending there who said you would like it too. Frankly, I've seen these. You don't want to do that. And you don't want to say that you heard their psychology major is good. They also know that. So this is where you take it beyond and you tie it back to yourself. That's really, really important in that case. So in terms of reducing anxiety with the essays, start brainstorming early. You're going to have some senior year teachers who are going to say, hey, we have time in class to write one. We might write it this fall. Don't wait until then. If you have a junior year teacher doing it, awesome. Start thinking about it. But you want to write about what matters to you and not what you think colleges want. And that can be committing to writing a sentence before bed twice a week about what you think you might want to write about. Give yourself a spot of time where you really want to make sure that you're thinking about what is something I wish more people knew about me? Or like I said, ask your best friend, what do you think I should tell this college about myself? And remember, it's one part of the whole picture, that pie chart that changes all the time. There's a sliver in there for essay as well. And you want to get feedback if it's from a college coach, if it's from your guidance counselor, if it's from an English teacher, if it's from your parent, your sibling who's already in college. You want to make the process smoother and you want to have support. You want some reassurance at the end when it's time to hit submit. All right, we're going to briefly talk about the activities because I know it's already 5:55 and I want to be conscientious of people's time. I do see one quick question here. When will be the best time to take the SAT? That is really student dependent. Generally speaking, I suggest one in the fall of junior year and the spring of junior year. I recommend taking it at least twice. The most common is 3 times. I don't recommend topping out at 5, 6 tests. Students start to plateau at that point. Official tests, that is. I do have sophomores that take it in the spring of their sophomore year. Some students who score extremely high on the PSAT or a mock SAT, I would encourage to take it earlier because, again, you're going to move further away from that math. All right. Consideration for the activities section, and I'm going to do this really quickly. You're only allowed to put in 10 activities. So some students, that's filtering through a lot. They do a lot. They're very busy. There's a lot to go through. For other students, they might not need to list 10, but you want to list at least 4. And activities can be a variety of things. It doesn't have to be that you're the president of the debate club. It can be that you created something in your neighborhood to mow everybody's lawns during the summer, whatever it might be. Those are activities. If you're part of your youth group at your church, if your, work is an activity. So think about those things. Word count is extremely limited. So you have to explain what the activity is in a very concise way. Sure, you can put like basketball, captain, forward. That's fine, but there's other ones where it might be a group the college is not familiar with, and you have to try to be really concise in trying to get the point across. Colleges value depth over quantity. You don't have to be in 85 clubs to be considered a good candidate. There's traditional extracurriculars and there's some new approaches today. Formal research, internships, shadowing professionals, doing various job shadows, community-based projects, some social initiatives that students might do. I saw a lot of those pop up during the pandemic, for example. Entrepreneurial ventures, starting a blog, a YouTube channel with extremely appropriate content, volunteer work back on both sides here. And so do you want to just have traditional or do you want to just have new approaches? You want both. You really want both. You can be on the track team and then also have a really cool Instagram page where you're a graphic designer. All right, getting through applying really quickly here. So no fun, they do cost quite a bit to apply. And so you're going to be paying for the applications, the transcripts, and sending the test scores. Sometimes you can get a fee waiver during a visit, an open house, a college fair. Certain colleges will announce free periods where they will let you apply for free up until a certain date. And you want to make sure of this, I can't stress enough, that all of your materials get to the college before the deadline. Even if they say they accept them after, you are going to hate when you get the email or the phone call saying we don't have your transcript. It's going to panic you. They may even have it, but they're going to call you and say that because someone doesn't have it in your folder yet. So please, 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 go by the deadlines that are in your school about transcripts, make sure that you're asking your teachers early enough, and make sure that your scores are being sent from the College Board. I know they're being sent online, but do it at least a month before. Unless you're taking a very close date, then you're going to do it 2 weeks before. And proofread, proofread, proofread. It's not just for the essays. I've had too many students try to apply by not capitalizing anything. This is not a text message. So capitalize where appropriate, make sure that date of birth is correct. Don't check the wrong major by accident. Really check everything, or check that you're not living on campus, something like that. You want to double and triple check everything. After you apply, you guys will get to this, but they'll receive a confirmation email, and they'll also be logging into a status type of application status portal where they'll see information and be contacted by the school. As I mentioned, and this is leading into our Q&A, we do have 2 free tutoring/coaching hours with the purchase of a college coaching, test prep, or academic tutoring package, and you can also get 50% off registration. This is a really great way to kickstart tutoring or college coaching, and a good way to do so this time of year. But for Q&A, I see a couple over here. What's the deal with submitting the best SAT, ACT results from multiple attempts? Do colleges allow it? Yes, super scoring is allowed at the vast majority of colleges. There are some, you'll see some things on their website, so always quadruple check. But you can take your best English, let's say from October, and you can take your best math from March, put them together as one list. Again, check with each school, but super scoring is certainly an option, I would say 90% of the time. Okay, another one about super scoring, got it. Are activities and extracurriculars the same? Absolutely, those are the same. So activities can be the things you do in school, but it can also be that you're in dance after school, you're in the Girl Scouts, you're in the Boy Scouts, anything like that. You shovel your neighbor's lawn and made it into a little business, that's an activity as well. School newspaper, yearbook, all of those. All right, any other questions? Because we got super scoring. I wouldn't focus on one section at a time and another the next. That can be very disjointed. I saw that that question there. You want to try your best on both of them, but in the in-between, hyper focusing on those areas. Let's say it was math. Hyper focusing on those equivalent expressions that you might have struggled with, or perhaps it was something more in the trigonometry and the geometry section, stuff like that. You want to do that, but you still want to try as hard as you can on the verbal section. It feels too disjointed and it gets you out of test taking mode. SAT or ACT prep resources. Certainly there are a lot out there. First and foremost would be really educating yourself through a mock test. I would stress that a lot. When you take one with us, you also get access to 1,400 practice questions and in-depth analysis. And it's a really good way to check on that. So that's really helpful to all of you. And, then certainly there's practice tests available. You can look at the College Board, but I do suggest taking a mock test or two, getting that baseline and really diving in, because one thing that you will find is that on the College Board, you're not going to see the exact questions you got right or wrong. You're not going to see what area you need to work on the most. It's going to be very general. With us, you can see exactly which types of questions you need to improve on, how long you spent on it, what percentage of students also got that one correct or incorrect, and it ties you directly to related SAT and ACT questions. Yes, there is an option to mention awards. That will be under the honors section. So you'll see that there. I see that question. So somebody was wondering where you put awards on the application. There is a section entitled honors. How can one decide which test to take, ACT or SAT? Take an SAT mock, take an ACT mock, or ask yourself this question. Are you more of an algebra student or are you more of a geometry student? Take the SAT if it's algebra, take the ACT if it's geometry. ADHD wise, if you have ADHD, SAT is now a better fit than the ACT. But that all being said, those are general comments. I would strongly suggest taking one of each. October is a perfect chance to do that with us. And then you can compare the results and see which one feels better. 9 times out of 10, a student walks out of it and says, I hated that one, this one's okay. And so you'll find out from that as well. I just got another question about awards. Those come out in the honors section. All right, and you're welcome. I got a nice thank you there. That's great. Any other questions? I know we're probably a little over time here, but I'm happy to take another one if there's a question out there. And just so you know, all of you will also be receiving a college admissions timeline and checklist for 9th through 12th graders, so you'll get that in the email follow-up from me. But let's see. No other open questions, it appears, at this time. So I do really want to thank you for your attention tonight. I know I covered a ton, and there probably leads to more and more questions as you think about it after tonight's presentation. But I'm certainly here to answer questions you might have. My email address is right here if you'd like to send an email my way. And I'll be sending you every resource we talked about tonight and links to chat with me or one of my colleagues, certainly about the offer we have for those 2 free tutoring hours, and certainly links to our mock test so you can help decide between the SAT and the ACT. All right, and I think without further ado, since there are no more questions, I would like to just thank you all for joining me tonight. I hope you have a lovely evening, and thank you for joining Novastar. Take care. Bye-bye.